The glittering world of global celebrity often appears from the outside to be an unassailable fortress of mutual admiration, shared success, and unbreakable alliances. Yet beneath this polished veneer lies a far more volatile reality where shifting dynamics can quietly dismantle even the most high-profile relationships. Within these elite circles, connections are frequently forged not just out of personal affection, but through a complex web of shared experiences, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding of the immense pressures that come with existing in the permanent glare of the public eye. When individuals who have conquered their respective industries cross paths, the resulting bonds often seem destined to endure the test of time, serving as a testament to their collective resilience and stature. For years, the observers of modern culture watched what appeared to be a flawless alignment of star power, a bridging of worlds that brought together the pinnacle of British sports and fashion royalty with the highly publicized, transformative figures of the modern cultural landscape. It was a narrative built on mutual support, highly visible public appearances, and the kind of overlapping social networks that define the upper echelons of international society, creating an impression of solidarity that few believed could ever truly fracture. If you find yourself fascinated by the intricate and often hidden dynamics that govern the lives of the world's most influential figures, take a brief moment to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an in-depth analysis of these unfolding stories. This particular connection, which once seemed to embody the very definition of a contemporary power friendship, was anchored by shared milestones and public displays of unity that captured the imagination of millions around the globe. The narrative was compelling, depicting a seamless blend of traditional British achievement, entrepreneurial brilliance, and a new, forward-thinking approach to global influence that promised to redefine contemporary elite society. Yet, as the seasons changed and the public focus shifted, a subtle but unmistakable distance began to emerge between these two prominent couples, a quiet separation that spoke volumes without a single public declaration being made. The signs were small at first, noticeable only to those who closely monitor the movements and social calendars of the ultra-wealthy, but they gradually coalesced into an undeniable reality that something fundamental had shifted. While one couple continued to expand their global footprint, moving effortlessly through the highest circles of entertainment, fashion, and business, the other found themselves increasingly isolated within their own coastal enclave. The geographic proximity of their recent movements only served to highlight this growing chasm, creating a stark contrast that raised countless questions among seasoned observers of the social scene. Not long ago, the world-renowned fashion icon and the legendary sports pioneer found themselves spending an extended period in the sun-drenched landscapes of Southern California. Operating just a short distance up the road, from the heavily guarded neighborhood where the former royal pair now resides. In the past, such a close alignment of schedules and geography would have inevitably resulted in a highly publicized reunion, a shared dinner, or at the very least, a private gathering away from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. The local area, famous for its exclusive estates and ultra-private residents, is precisely the kind of environment where these titans of culture would normally converge to reinforce their long-standing ties and share insights into their respective journeys. Instead, the days passed in absolute silence, with no secret meetings, no shared security details, and no communication whatsoever between the two households, signaling a profound and chilly detachment. For the former royal couple, whose current daily lives are often characterized by a noticeably lighter schedule and a distinct lack of the overwhelming official duties that once filled their calendars, this absence of connection could not be attributed to a mere clash of busy timetables. The reality of the situation was far more deliberate, pointing away from the convenient excuse of logistical conflicts and toward a conscious decision to maintain a strict, unyielding boundary. It became increasingly clear to those embedded within these elite circles that the absence of interaction was not an accident of timing, but the direct result of an intentional exclusion, a quiet but firm closing of the door. To understand how a relationship that once seemed so full of promise and mutual respect could deteriorate into such a state of absolute freezing neglect, one must look far beyond the superficial glamour of their public personas. It requires an examination of the subtle, underlying frictions that can quietly erode the foundation of even the most seemingly secure friendships, particularly when the individuals involved operate under vastly different sets of values and expectations. In the high-stakes environment of global celebrity, where reputation is the ultimate currency and trust is notoriously difficult to come by, the standards for maintaining a place within an inner circle are exceptionally high. When those standards are consistently challenged by behaviors that introduce instability, unpredictability, and emotional exhaustion into the dynamic, the natural response for those who value their peace is a systematic withdrawal. The journey from the warmth of a historic celebration to the cold reality of total social estrangement is a complex tapestry woven from mismatched expectations, perceived slights, and a fundamental divergence in how these couples choose to navigate their lives. As the public began to piece together the fragments of this broken alliance, it became evident that the breakdown was not sparked by a single catastrophic event, but rather by a slow accumulation of grievances that eventually became too heavy to sustain. The contrasting philosophies of the two pairs could not be more pronounced, with one side dedicating decades to the meticulous construction of a global empire built on hard work, resilience, and a steadfast commitment to positive reinforcement. On the other side, a pattern of behavior had emerged that many within their former circle began to view with increasing weariness, a recurring theme of discontent and perceived victimhood that seemed to overshadow every positive achievement. This fundamental difference in outlook created a psychological barrier that proved impossible to bridge, transforming what was once a source of mutual strength into a source of undeniable friction. As we begin to peel back the layers of this fascinating societal fracture, we uncover a series of distinct catalysts that led to the ultimate undoing of this modern friendship, setting the stage for an absolute and permanent separation that continues to reverberate through the world of the global elite. The breakdown of this high-profile alliance can be traced to several distinct and deeply rooted factors, the first of which centers on a profound mismatch in emotional energy and daily outlook. Within the exclusive echelons of international celebrity, where individuals face constant scrutiny, successful pairs often cultivate social circles that serve as sanctuaries of mutual encouragement, positivity, and collective elevation. For the fashion icon and the sports legend, friendship has always been defined by an unwritten code of uplifting one another, celebrating milestones, and offering constructive support in a highly demanding world. They, along with their close-knit group of global achievers, have deliberately surrounded themselves with people who radiate a forward-moving vitality, focusing on the future, and cultivating a supportive atmosphere where complaints are replaced by compliments. When the former royal couple entered this dynamic, however, a starkly different emotional pattern quickly began to assert itself, introducing an exhausting cycle of persistent grievances and perpetual discontent. Instead of the uplifting exchanges that characterize healthy social bonds, interactions increasingly became dominated by an unrelenting focus on past injuries, personal slights, and an endless stream of interpersonal drama. This constant state of negativity, often described by those within their former circle as a form of emotional exhaustion, gradually began to drain the vitality out of every social gathering. It became a pattern where no circumstance was ever quite satisfactory, no achievement was celebrated without a lingering shadow of resentment, and the conversation almost exclusively revolved around perceived injustices. Over time, this relentless focus on conflict and victimhood transformed what should have been a relaxing escape into a heavy, taxing ordeal, forcing the entrepreneur and her husband to reconsider the value of maintaining an active connection with individuals who seemed entirely consumed by their own internal storms. This leads directly into the second critical catalyst for the estrangement, which manifests as a deep-seated paranoia and an escalating pattern of self-imposed isolation that has come to define the modern trajectory of the former royals. A true friendship requires a foundational layer of security and mutual trust, yet the environment surrounding the coastal pair became increasingly defined by suspicion, defensive maneuvers, and an apparent inability to maintain stable long-term relationships. Observers noticed with growing concern that this was not an isolated incident of a single friendship souring, but rather part of a much broader systemic dismantling of their entire social and familial network. In a relatively short span of time, they systematically distanced themselves from their own staff, severed communication lines with multiple branches of their respective families, and alienated long-standing childhood companions. This sweeping pattern of cutting ties left them increasingly isolated, developing a highly problematic reputation within elite circles as individuals with whom any long-term association carries a significant social and emotional risk. The broader community began to question the wisdom of investing trust in a couple that appeared capable of discarding decades of history with family and friends at the slightest hint of disagreement. For the veteran sports star and his business-minded wife, who pride themselves on fierce loyalty, deep family values, and maintaining decades-long friendships with their peers, this erratic and defensive behavior was a massive red flag that signaled an inherent instability they were simply unwilling to invite into their own carefully balanced lives. This atmosphere of hypervigilance naturally fed into the third major reason for the definitive split, which can be described as an uncompromising, binary worldview that demands absolute, unquestioning allegiance. In the universe constructed by the former royal pair, relationships are rarely treated as egalitarian partnerships based on mutual give and take. Instead, they are viewed through a rigid lens of total compliance, where one is either entirely with them or entirely against them. This ultimatum became highly problematic due to the long-standing, multi-generational relationships that the fashion designer and her husband had carefully nurtured within the British establishment, including deeply rooted ties of respect and affection with the traditional hierarchy. When the coastal couple demanded that their friends take a definitive side, actively forcing them to reject established connections with figures like the future monarch and his spouse, they created an impossible and highly unfair dynamic. True friendship is not a one-way therapy session designed solely to absorb one party's grievances while offering endless admiration and getting absolutely nothing in return. Yet this was precisely what was being demanded. The expectation was that the entrepreneurial couple should completely subvert their own historical alliances, dedicate their social capital to validating the grievances of the coastal pair, and offer unyielding, exclusive devotion without receiving any reciprocal support. For individuals who have spent their entire adult lives navigating the complex social architecture of the global stage with grace and independence, such a controlling, self-centered expectation was not only entirely unworkable, but fundamentally disrespectful to the basic principles of mutual respect and social autonomy. Beyond these deep psychological and behavioral frictions, the fourth element driving the separation is the rapidly widening gap in their fundamental levels of professional achievement, public respect, and basic societal contribution. The legendary athlete and his global style partner have spent more than a quarter of a century in the absolute highest tiers of public life, meticulously building a massive, tangible empire through relentless hard work, undeniable talent, and an enduring commitment to earning their stature day by day. They have navigated intense media storms, transformed their initial fields of success into multi-billion-dollar global brands, and earned the genuine respect of peers and institutions worldwide through measurable, concrete output. In sharp contrast, the coastal couple appeared to operate under the assumption that their mere titles and inherent status should automatically grant them the same level of global influence, reverence, and commercial success. Without the accompanying track record of sustained labor or creative innovation, this profound disparity in work ethic and creative substance inevitably created an awkward, almost insurmountable chasm during their shared social interactions, making genuine, high-level conversation increasingly difficult to sustain. While one side was actively managing complex international enterprises, launching major creative initiatives, and discussing real-world achievements, the other side's daily pursuits began to appear increasingly superficial and detached from reality, often revolving around minor, performative domestic tasks, or highly publicized but ultimately empty projects that lacked any real depth or lasting impact. This massive divergence in substance made it glaringly obvious that their trajectories were moving in completely opposite directions, transforming what once seemed like a partnership of equals into an unbalanced relationship that lacked any common professional or intellectual ground. This brings us directly to the fifth and perhaps most explosive catalyst for the final rupture, which involves an egregious breach of personal trust and a profound level of disrespect that occurred within the private sphere of their interactions. Following the historic and highly celebrated ceremonies of 2018, where the fashion icon and her husband were prominent and supportive guests, the designer genuinely attempted to extend a warm, welcoming hand to the newest member of the global elite by offering valuable insider access to her curated world of beauty, style, and personal wellness. Rather than receiving this generous gesture with the grace and appreciation it deserved, the newly arrived figure responded with immediate cynicism, leveling wild and entirely unfounded accusations that the offer was merely a calculated ploy designed to exploit the relationship and promote a commercial brand. The situation escalated dramatically when the former prince, adopting this defensive stance, made a highly confrontational personal phone call to the legendary sports figure, explicitly accusing the family of leaking private information to the media for personal gain. This shocking accusation struck at the very heart of the couple's core values, as they have always maintained an ironclad reputation for discretion, loyalty, and protective secrecy within their inner circle. Although the coastal couple later attempted to walk back the severity of the charge by quietly deflecting the blame onto a lower-level employee, the damage to the relationship was already catastrophic and entirely irreversible. For the global business tycoons, this unfounded attack on their integrity was the final proof that no amount of kindness or support would ever be enough to satisfy a dynamic so deeply rooted in suspicion, bringing an absolute, permanent end to a friendship that had simply become too toxic to endure. To truly comprehend the gravity of this complete social excommunication, one must look closely at the remarkable biographies and foundational values of the individuals involved, which reveals precisely why this permanent fracture represents such a significant shift in the landscape of global influence. The story of the legendary sports pioneer and his fashion mogul wife is one of relentless ambition, extraordinary work ethic, and an unwavering commitment to personal and professional reinvention over the course of nearly 3 decades. Rising from modest working-class roots in the United Kingdom, the iconic midfielder transformed himself into a global sporting phenomenon through sheer dedication on the pitch, earning legendary status at Manchester United and commanding the captaincy of the English national team. His career was defined not merely by natural athletic gift, but by hours of solitary practice, a legendary resilience in the face of intense public scrutiny, and a deep-seated understanding of teamwork, loyalty, and institutional respect. Alongside him, his wife achieved historic success as a core member of a record-breaking pop group that came to define an entire era of global youth culture, capturing the imagination of millions worldwide with a message of independence and solidarity. Rather than resting on the laurels of her musical fame, she embarked on a second, immensely challenging career in the notoriously cutthroat world of high fashion, gradually silencing skeptics by building an internationally acclaimed luxury brand through painstaking labor, creative vision, and a meticulous attention to detail. Together, they forged a historic partnership that transcended their original fields, systematically constructing a global commercial empire valued at hundreds of millions of dollars while navigating the relentless glare of international media with impeccable grace, discretion, and a fierce protection of their inner circle. For a power couple of this extraordinary stature, who have spent their entire adult lives learning how to survive and thrive within the highest tiers of society, the foundational pillars of any relationship are mutual trust, professional respect, and an absolute commitment to privacy. When they extended their friendship to the newly arrived coastal couple, they did so under the assumption that they were engaging with peers who shared these fundamental values, making the subsequent betrayal and erratic behavior all the more jarring and unacceptable to their established way of life. The background of the former royal pair, by contrast, reflects a completely different trajectory that helps explain the inherent friction that eventually tore this high-profile friendship apart. The former prince, born into a life of unimaginable traditional privilege and systemic deference, spent his formative years operating within the rigid, highly protected structure of a historic institution, a reality that left him poorly equipped to navigate the egalitarian, performance-based dynamics of the modern entrepreneurial world. His spouse, having achieved moderate success within the competitive television industry of North America, brought her own complex set of ambitions to the global stage. Yet her rapid ascent through marriage into the absolute pinnacle of traditional status created a volatile mix of heightened expectations and deep-seated insecurities. When they made the historic and highly publicized decision to distance themselves from their ancestral responsibilities and establish a new base in the sun-drenched enclave of Southern California, they claimed to be seeking a life of independent impact, creative freedom, and global philanthropic leadership. However, instead of dedicating themselves to the quiet, disciplined work required to build a sustainable, substantive legacy from the ground up, their new life quickly became defined by a series of highly public recriminations, explosive media interviews, and a continuous commercialization of their personal grievances. This stark divergence in how the two couples chose to utilize their respective platforms created an ideological chasm that made any long-term social alignment entirely impossible to sustain. While the veteran sports star and the fashion icon continued to expand their global initiatives, launch successful business ventures, and maintain warm, productive relationships with world leaders and cultural institutions alike, the coastal couple found themselves trapped in a repetitive cycle of self-induced drama and escalating isolation. The true significance of this dramatic falling out extends far beyond a mere clash of celebrity egos or a simple disagreement between wealthy neighbors. It serves as a powerful, illustrative case study in the shifting boundaries of contemporary cultural influence and the timeless importance of social capital. In the ultra-exclusive universe inhabited by these figures, reputation is not just a matter of public relations, but the absolute currency upon which empires are built, alliances are formed, and long-term security is guaranteed. By choosing to completely sever all ties with the coastal couple, the legendary athlete and his entrepreneurial wife sent a clear, undeniable signal to the rest of the global elite that certain boundaries of trust, discretion, and mutual respect are absolutely non-negotiable, regardless of an individual's inherited status or global name recognition. This definitive separation has reverberated through the highest social circles of Hollywood, New York, and London, effectively forcing other prominent figures, corporate brands, and philanthropic organizations to quietly evaluate their own associations with the isolated pair. As the dust settles on this high-profile fracture, it becomes increasingly evident that the era of effortless influence, based purely on historical titles and media-driven controversy, is rapidly drawing to a close, replaced by a renewed emphasis on tangible achievement, professional reliability, and interpersonal integrity. The fashion pioneer and her husband continue to move forward with absolute confidence, their global standing reinforced by their steadfast adherence to the values of hard work, family unity, and unyielding loyalty to those who earn their trust. Meanwhile, the view from the quiet hills of Montecito serves as a stark, solitary reminder of the immense cost of alienating one's most steadfast supporters through a pattern of suspicion, entitlement, and emotional volatility. Ultimately, this complete and final breakdown of what was once celebrated as a modern power friendship demonstrates that even in a world dominated by superficial glamour and fleeting trends, the foundational principles of genuine connection, mutual respect, and earned dignity remain the true, enduring measures of lasting success.